Good morning and welcome to our UBC Learning Circle, Disconnect, Reconnect with Vanessa and Ariana from Decolonize and Rize. Today's conversation is presented in partnership with the Center for Excellence in Indigenous Health. We'd like to thank the First Nations Health Authority for generously funding the UBC Learning Circle and allowing us to have these conversations. Before I formally begin, I'd like to acknowledge with respect and gratitude that I'm joining you from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Please feel free to introduce yourself and the nation you're calling it from in the chat box. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Serene Squawkin. I am the Learning Circle manager. I am Syilx Okanagan on my mother's side and Hickory Apache and Belgian settler on my father's side. I'll be the moderator for today's discussion, and joining us working behind the scenes is Cynthia, our production coordinator, and Kira, our program assistant. They'll be interacting with everyone in the chat. And finally, before we get into today's discussion, I'll provide a gentle heads up that the topics covered may be emotionally triggering or sensitive. So please make sure that you're looking after yourself. And if at any point in time you need to talk to an elder, friend, counselor, or family member, don't hesitate to do so. We have some prompts in the chat if you need additional support. Now I'll turn it over to our guests to introduce themselves.
Hello, good morning, everybody. It's so nice to be back with the UBC Learning Circle. Miigwech for having us back. And I was just looking through all of the names of everyone who's joining in. So it's great to see all of your names, great to see some of your introductions popping into the chat. And we're excited to spend the next 90 minutes with you. I'm going to pull up the slides here, and I'm just going to ask Vanessa to give me a heads up, make sure that we can see the slides.
You can see it.
Amazing. You know, you never know with technology these days.
Okay. We're off to a good start.
We are. The slides are up. Like that's half the battle right there. All right. So today we are talking about disconnecting to reconnect. And I'll give our kind of formal agenda overview of the different things that we're going to be going into today. But Vanessa sent me a message earlier and she's like, I feel like our description of the circle is maybe a little bit misleading. I think we go a lot deeper and a lot more powerful than what the description said. That's how we feel anyway. So we hope that you feel the same as well. I would like to start by acknowledging the land that I'm tuning in from today. So today I have the pleasure and honor of tuning in as an uninvited guest on the traditional and unceded lands of the Hul'qumi'num and Tsimshian speaking peoples on what's colonially known as Salt Spring Island. It's a little island just off the west coast of so-called BC. And this island is an interesting one. There is a long-standing myth on this island that when settlers arrived here, that the island was empty, that nobody was using it. And that, of course, is not the case. There weren't many permanent settlements or permanent places of community and living from the different indigenous communities around the region. This island was used as hunting grounds. It was used for aquaculture and clam gardens. Some groups used this island as a healing place. And folks kind of came and left. It was just part of the natural highway. And so part of what I feel my work here is to dispel the myth that this was empty, unclaimed land when folks arrived, and to also contribute to the really important work that's being done with regards to land back here on the island. So I'm very, very grateful to be here today. And I'll start by introducing myself in my traditional language. So Buju Anin Indanawe Meganaduk, Ariana Nindijnakas, Nindonjiba Amjanang First Nation Makonendodam Ninshigo Daya Unceded Coast Salish Niba Bamadiz. And what I said there was hello, good morning, or good afternoon, my relatives. My name is Ariana, and I'm a woman of mixed ancestry. So on my mother's side, my family comes from the Amjanang First Nation in so-called Ontario. And on my father's side, my family comes from Methoni in Greece. I'm realizing I haven't updated my name with my pronouns. I use she, her pronouns. And as I said today, I'm tuning in from the traditional lands of the Hul'qumi'num and Tsimshian speaking peoples. And I'm one of the co-founders here of Decolonize and Rize, where alongside Vanessa, we offer workshops like this, decolonial facilitation, lots of different things under the umbrella of reconciliation and decolonization to organizations of all shapes and sizes. And outside of my work with Vanessa, I'm a breathwork facilitator, holding space for healing circles, both in person and online. I'm going to pass it over to you, Vanessa, to introduce yourself.
Merci, Ariana. Atanche Kiowao. Hello, how are all of you doing? My name is Vanessa Lesperance, and I am also a mixed heritage woman. I am a European settler on my dad's side and proud Red River Métis on my mom's side, and a citizen of Manitoba Métis Federation. I'm originally from Treaty One territory, also known as Winnipeg, but I've relocated out west and am an uninvited guest on various parts of gorgeous Coast Salish territory, but specifically joining you today from the traditional, ancestral, and stolen territory of Kakite First Nation. And when I mentioned that, I'm reminded that Kakite, for those who may not know, means resting place. And considering today's topic, disconnect to reconnect, it's my hope that we can lay to rest probably your huge to-do lists, lay to rest, anything that doesn't serve you, lay to rest, like, oh my goodness, I have this going on, just to really be present and to give this time to you to fill your cup. So gratitude to Kakite Nation for being the stewards of these lands since time immemorial. I'm the other co-founder of Decolonize and Rize. And another reason why this topic resonates with me so much is I'm a recovering person working in corporate environments. I left the corporate world about 5 years ago. And working in big colonial corporate environments, it conditions us to always be on, always be connected, do more, be more. And I realized after I left how tied to productivity, I tied that to my value and my worth. So it's taken a lot of work to disconnect from that and start to really decolonize my own mindset when it comes to this. So this is a topic that's really near and dear to me. I'm also passionate about decolonizing everything, but specifically decolonizing business, because this is where I think that we can really start to see change, because entrepreneurs, businesses, business leaders have such a great opportunity to influence change in our society, and can make change so much faster than big colonial governments. So I'm passionate about decolonizing business. And outside of my work with Ariana, I'm also a part-time instructor at the Justice Institute, teaching in their Center of Leadership, and also a course on power and privilege. So that's a little bit about me in a nutshell. And happy to be in virtual circle with all of you today.
Miigwech, Vanessa. I saw somebody in the chat note that they love the term recovering from corporate environments. Maybe we need to have circles held just on that. So you've heard a little bit from us, and a lot of you have already actually, it's like you knew what we were going to ask you. You've already started to share where you're tuning in from. We've seen a lot of the different traditional territories popped into the chat. This is so lovely to see. This is something that we always like to ask, so we can just kind of get a sense of where folks are tuning in from. So if you haven't already done so, we'll invite you to share in the chat where you're tuning in from. And then we also like to start with things on a little bit of a lighter note, with a visual check-in. And so on this next slide here, you're going to see a number of animals. And we'd love for you to share in the chat which number or numbers from 1 to 6 share how you're feeling today. And, it can be a combination. It can be, we can be two things at once because we're complex human beings. I saw a 3, LOL. I love it. Some 2s, 3s. Okay, we've got a few 1s in here. Yeah, feeling the 1 vibes for sure. Although the sun is making me feel good. It's giving me some life. Lots of threes. I'm so glad. I love chickens, and so I'm always very excited when people can resonate with the chickens on the deck. Vanessa, how are you feeling today?
Be honest, I feel like I'm a mix of just one and four. These are wild times we're living in right now, politically and socially. And I also think this circle, this topic we're talking about today, it comes at a really timely matter because there's so much wild information and the news cycle and just everything that's going on. Taking time to mindfully disconnect, I think, is really good for our holistic well-being. But I've been in it, so I'm reminding myself I need to be mindful of disconnecting. So
Mm.
because I've been so clued in, I'm definitely feeling a one and a four. What about you?
Yeah, Miigwech for your honesty with that. Um, again, I love the chicken, so I'm feeling a three. I get the sense that there's kind of like a sleepy calmness there, but then I also really like the panda because the panda just kind of seems like they're smiling and they don't really know what's going on. And if you look close, you can even kind of see the tongue sticking out a little bit. So if I could just channel a bit more of that energy, I would be grateful. And I saw someone say that they were a solid eight. And you know what? I honor and respect the eight as well. Okay, so you can keep popping in the chat. It's been so good to see your responses. I've also seen some LOLs, so I'm glad that we can start off with a little bit of a laugh here too. So, a reminder that we always like to offer at the beginning of our sessions is to honor your needs. So, I know we can't see you, but we would say this even if we were doing it in a meeting format where we could see you. If you need tea, please have tea. If you need to eat, please eat. If you need to step up and leave for a minute, do what you need to do in order to honor your own needs. We would be remiss to like not encourage you to step away, to give yourselves breaks when we're talking about disconnecting so that we can reconnect. Our bodies hold so much wisdom and intelligence, and even something as simple as drinking water when we feel thirsty or going to the bathroom when we feel like we have to go to the bathroom, that starts to create a strong foundation of safety and connection within our bodies. So we really want to offer an encouragement for you to listen to the level that feels good for you today. To give you an overview of our time together, we're going to start off with a little activity. Vanessa's going to lead us through something that may be a little bit confronting and allows us to cultivate some awareness around our use of technology. We'll talk a little bit about the impacts of technology on our well-being, both from a personal level and a collective level. And then we're going to look at the interconnectedness between colonialism, capitalism, and technology. And this is a juicy one. And then we'll go into some discussion both between Vanessa and myself, but also inviting shares from you on how we can start to disconnect, what we can do to spend less time on our phones and doing other things. And we'll share some practical ideas as well about how we can disconnect and ways that we can connect with the land. And again, it doesn't matter if you live in the city, if you live somewhere where it seems like there's not a lot of land, there's still land and there's still things that we can do that meet a variety of circumstances and abilities and life experiences. So that's a bit of our time together today. So Vanessa, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ariana. I'm going to take us through a bit of an activity here. And before we do, I also just want to take time to acknowledge that today is equinox. Today is the official new start of spring. And so, as I'm sure many of us know, one of the part of the teachings of spring is like planting new seeds, allowing new things to grow, maybe new concepts, new ideas, things you want to birth, things you want to bring to life. And so this time together, especially through this next activity, just to bring awareness of how much tech we're using. This isn't meant to shame or guilt anyone. It just meant to create awareness, because we can't change anything we're not aware of. So we try to enhance our collective awareness, just make sure we're aware of like how tuned in we are to our devices. And with our time together in our 90-minute circle, it's my hope that we start to plant seeds, and plant seeds just for to increase our self-awareness, to know exactly how do we want to show up, and create awareness of how connected we are to our devices, just so we can make informed decisions for ourselves. So I love that today's spring. I love that we're doing this today, and I think it's really timely. So I just want to offer that. Okay, so our first activity today is we're going to see, we want to know, how well do you think you know that how much time you spend on your devices? When I did this activity with my aunt, I was surprised. She was pretty big on. She knew. I'm like, yeah. My aunt was like, I spend about 5 hours a day, and that turned out to be true. So I'm going to pop a link in the chat. Yeah, someone was like, too much. Crystal, way. Okay, so already folks are like, no, way too much. And that's okay. So again, I just want to really reinforce, this isn't about judgment, shame, or guilt. It's just purely to create that self-awareness, just so we know, right? Because knowing is power. So I'm going to put a link in the chat, and hopefully this opens for folks. If it doesn't work for you for whatever reason, I'm going to get you to put your guess in the chat. But with the link, there's going to be a column. In column B, it says start here. Just choose a row. There's going to be a row for like 400 people, so everyone will have a chance to put it in. Just guess, what is your best guess on how many hours a day on average you spend on your phone? Okay, so it's just a guessing game, and maybe that's great. Put in the answer if you know. Otherwise, just you're going to take a guess. No one cheat yet. Don't actually go to your device to look, but this is just a guess. How much time do we think we're spending on our devices? So I'm popping that link in the chat now. Hopefully this document opens. Well, I'm going to put it in there we go. If you put your guesses in that link, open that document, and it's going to create an average for us. So we see at a glance how much time we're collectively spending on our devices.
I'll just acknowledge too, I saw a few questions about like, does this include listening to audio and things like that? I think that we could let everybody kind of decide on their own. Oh, I see what's happening here. Vanessa, can you reshare the link, but make sure
Here's
that
the
it's
link
going
again.
to everyone?
Yep.
And not
Yep.
hosting.
So folks, open the link, pop your guesses there, put it in column C, and just put in a number. So if someone put 3 to 5 hours, I'm just going to say 4 for that person. So
Yeah,
just choose row. Yeah.
I was going to say personally, I don't include like if I'm listening to music or a podcast or an audiobook, I tend to not include it, and I don't think my phone records that as well. Because it feels like screen time light for me. I might still be outside or cleaning or cooking or something like that, but that's the way I approach it. I don't know if Vanessa, if you have different thoughts on it.
Yeah, I like to know just how much I am using my device, regardless of it. But in the next step activity or the next part of this exercise, you will see a breakdown too, which I think is also interesting. All right, so I see a bunch of answers in here. And it looks like, so based on what everyone's inputted so far, it looks like our average for this group, we're thinking about 5 hours, for this group on average that folks spend on their phone. Okay, cool. Now that we have that, what we're going to do now is go to your device to actually find out. And if you don't know how to do this, we have instructions on the next slide. So what I'm going to do is get you to actually find out what your phone says, how much time you spend. And if you don't know how to do that, there's instructions here on the slide. So whether you have Apple or Android, there's different ways to get there. But regardless of your phone, you go to settings. And then if you have an Apple, you go to screen time. But if you have Android, you're going to go to digital well-being. And then find out what your daily average actually is according to your phone. and you're going to put that in column H. So column H, you're going to put in what your actual time is, and we'll see how close or far off we were from our guess. And make sure if you put in, don't erase someone else's answer. So find a blank row, and you can scroll down. There's lots of room there. So you can scroll down to put your answer in an empty row. And so far, it looks like, so we guessed our daily average. Folks guessed, I think it was about 5 for me. And actual, it looks like we were actually accurate. And for this group, it looks like it's actually a little bit less, which is great. Oh, now we're going back to 5. So amazing. Yeah, so it looks like we're having about 5. So I like to do this activity just because it gives us an idea of like how accurate. Do we have a good grasp of how much time we're spending on our phones? And it seems like, at least for our group here, we do, which is amazing. So this shouldn't be, no one should be blindsided by this information. It looks like folks are like, yeah, I spend about 4 or 5 hours. And it looks like that's right. So which is amazing. So we do this exercise again, just to increase our self-awareness, just so we become aware. And again, we can't change anything we're not aware of. And when we have that information, then we can choose, is there something I want to change? Or maybe I'm happy with this. You're like, yeah, this seems accurate. This seems like realistic for me to spend about 5 hours a day on my phone for various things. And that's okay. So this isn't about forcing you to change or modify. It's just, again, about creating that self-awareness. So we're just really informed about our relationship with our phones and with tech.
I see a question in the chat that says, I'm wondering what would be considered a healthy amount.
Mm.
I personally don't know if that's a question that I want to answer. I'm thinking that after we share some of this information and we go through the discussions, that I think that that can be something that each individual in this room can decide. Just knowing and maybe being able to recognize some of the things that we share and seeing like, oh yeah, tech influences me in that way. I definitely notice myself feeling that way. And so maybe less is a healthy amount, whereas others might be able to handle more. And I've also seen some questions or some notes from folks about digital well-being being turned on or off. So if you haven't figured it out by this point, or like if it's not giving you answers because it wasn't turned on, that's okay. This is a great time to turn those trackers on if you're curious, and then you can start to collect some data from here. And there's something that I think is really important to acknowledge about this too, is that for folks with differing levels of abilities, being on tech and being on phones is a way of connecting for folks. And so I don't want to discredit that reality for people. If it's hard for you to get out of the house, if it's hard for you to go out and connect with people, like face to face, person to person, there's also, there's that consideration too. So that's why I don't want to say what a healthy amount is or isn't, because we all have our own different life experiences. And one of the things that I found really interesting when I started tracking is that I know that depending on where I am in my own personal moon cycle, my screen time goes up. So towards the end of my moon cycle, I notice myself just kind of being really tired and overstimulated more and wanting to check out more. So it's interesting to see if there are fluctuations in that too. So I just thought I would add that. I'll just pull out a couple things from the chat here, seeing that folks are saying that someone uses an app to limit my screen time. Yeah, there's different apps. I've tried all of them where it like makes you enter a password or like play a game with a tree if you're like gonna enter the app. And someone else noted, yeah, I have way more screen time when I have chronic pain flare-ups. Yes, we all have our own our own things going on that influence how much we might be using screens. And then, of course, there's work commitments too, right? So, again, not about shaming, just about awareness. So, now we want to get a little bit spicy. And we want to talk about the interconnectedness of colonialism, capitalism, and technology. And there's somebody, I don't want to name names, but I think you're going to know who you are. This is a friend, so I don't mind calling out on you. But there's somebody in this room who I know is working with an organization that is like very focused on this right now. And there's a lot of really good information that's like popping up on my LinkedIn about this. And so I want to share a little bit about the how colonialism and like the technological industry are very, very highly connected. And then Vanessa's going to go into a bit of a talk about capitalism and technology. But really, when we think about colonialism being rooted in this like expand and conquer mindset, like let's acquire new territory, let's dominate over with power, like let's be the first, let's be the biggest, let's be the strongest. We see that mindset coming in the world of technology and how some of the quote unquote like bigger players in the tech industry are trying to acquire as much of the digital landscape as possible. And I don't know about you, but when I think about companies that are operating with that like expand and dominate and acquire as much as possible, I don't personally see how there can also be space for focusing on the people who the technology and the products that they're creating are actually impacting and the long-term impacts of people and planet and all of that. We can also see this with generative AI and how a lot of folks are talking about AI essentially being a form of colonization of thoughts and ideas. And this is a really tough one. And I'll share a little bit with my own experience with ChatGPT. And I don't want to, again, shame folks or anything for using it, but I used it a little bit in the fall and I started getting into it and I realized how helpful it was for like creating lots of content for our LinkedIn. And then when I started to realize the environmental impacts of it, I was like, ugh, I don't know how good this feels. Maybe I need to stop. And then I realized how hard it was for me to do the things without the use of ChatGPT. Like it felt like my brain just kind of came to a stopping point, and I realized that even in just those couple of months, I was becoming dependent on it. And by using generative AI, we're essentially like feeding it. Like we are giving it our ideas. We are giving it our intellectual property. If we're using it to write a business plan, we're giving the robots all of our information. And I don't know if that's a bad thing. I'm not here to like talk about the ethics of it, but it's just interesting when we think of this mindset of like expansion and extraction, and how easy it is for us to willingly feed those machines. I do think that it is pause for consideration. And then, of course, a big topic of conversation as of late has been around Indigenous data sovereignty and who has access to communities' data. What are they doing with that? If communities want to have their data online, whether closed to the band or not, who's in control of the servers and the platforms and all of the things where that data is stored. So there's a lot of concern around data that shouldn't be shared outside of the community and who actually is going to have access to that in the long run. So there's just a lot of really kind of like we're still very much in new territory with this. So there's a lot to consider. And I'm also seeing that someone changes your mind by suggesting grammar, words, sentences. Yeah. And, I didn't use it a ton, but I used it enough to like kind of be able to tell. First, I was shocked when it would write an email that sounded very similar to me, like how quickly it took on my tone and my voice. But I can also start to see now, like it's becoming easier to be like, oh, I think that might have been written by AI. So I don't know. There's a lot to it. Vanessa, is there anything that you want to add to that piece?
Yeah, and I think it's important to acknowledge tech in of itself, social media in of itself, our phones, our smartphones in of itself, neither good nor bad. It's just based on like how do we use them, right? And the mindfulness behind it, but also learning about how there is intentionality about making them as addictive as possible, making emails as addictive as possible. Oh, I got a new notification. Maybe I should check that urge to check that message, right? Or that urge to check, oh, I got a notification on social media, right? This is by design. So again, we're not saying that tech in of itself, it also has so many good uses. We just really want to cultivate that mindfulness so we are aware, so we can reclaim our time and be intentional about how often we use the devices, how often we're connected to work, because it's so easy to be hyper connected to work 24/7 because of our devices. So it's really about cultivating that awareness. And also that understanding that, we'll get to this later, but how rest is resistance. And we mentioned that because I'm reading this really interesting book, and it's linking capitalism and colonialism together. It's fascinating. It's a two-part book. The first book starts from 1500 to about late 1800s, and the second book will be released later this year, picking up from late 1800s to present day. And the author does such an amazing job of showing how capitalism wouldn't exist without colonialism. And so, as employees, it's really important that we are mindful because it's so easy for us to be hyper connected. And that's what capitalism wants, right? Capitalism wants us dedicating our whole lives to work, responding to messages after hours, not taking our vacation, working through our weekends. So it's just really important that we, start to be mindful of taking breaks, taking our vacation, reclaiming that time for ourselves. So breaking that spell. And then also capitalism comes in because when they make our devices as addictive as possible, which they do, that allows marketers to market stuff to us so we consume more. So that it's this ongoing thing, right? And so tech uses capitalism and tech are interrelated that way. So again, this circle is just really intended just to bring that awareness. And it's not about saying don't use tech because we need to be realistic. Tech isn't going anywhere, but just being mindful of how are we using it? Are we using it in a good way? Melanie Goodchild has this quote, and she says, colonialism is about disconnection. Colonialism is about disconnection to ourselves, to our own emotions, to our culture, to our thoughts, feelings. It's about disconnection to one another because we live in hyper individualistic communities. And colonialism has also created disconnection to the land. So, on the flip side of that, decolonizing is reconnecting to ourselves, reconnecting to one another, and reconnecting to the land. And so, my question is how does tech help or hinder that reconnection process? So, I'll just leave that question with you. And moving right along, I forget what the next slide is here, Ariana. Oh, it's our reflection activity. Beautiful. Okay. We should have prepared folks to do this, but if you don't have pen and paper handy, please grab one pen and paper if there's something nearby. If not, you can also just use a digital notepad to take notes. We're going to do a reflection activity, and then I'm just going to get you to write down a few words after each round. So we're going to do 3 rounds of reflection, visualization, and just get you really in tuned in how you're feeling in your body, how you're feeling mentally, emotionally, after each round. Okay, so if you have pen and paper handy, that's great. You can use the digital notepad, and if not, that's okay. You can just reflect through this activity. So What we're going to do is this reflection, we're going to do 3 rounds, and it's just designed to get you really feeling in tune with your body, with your emotions. In our Western colonial world, we're so hyper connected to our minds that sometimes we just need that time just to sit and just think like, okay, how is this feeling in my body? How am I feeling in my emotions? So it's just time for us to get connected to our heart and just really cultivate that mindfulness of how being on tap, being hyper connected really makes us feel, and how in other environments, how that makes us feel. So for this activity, since we can't see your faces, that's great because you can have your cameras off. Invite you to either close your eyes, maybe look outside a window if that's accessible to you. Just gently just rest your eyes. Maybe just they're half closed. So 3 rounds. After each round, I'm just going to ask you a few questions just to really process what you experienced in that visualization. Okay. So for our first round, I want you to imagine you've just had a really busy day at work. You usually get quite a few emails throughout the day. Maybe you're like me and you manage multiple emails, multiple inboxes. And so you're trying to keep on top of all your emails, all your messages, all your text messages, all your instant messages, your DMs. There's just been a lot today for some reason. A lot of high important messages that you really feel need to respond to right away. And it's just kind of interrupted what you had planned for your day. But anyways, you have your full work day. You try and stay on top of your messages as much as possible. Maybe you shortened your lunch. Maybe you didn't even take a break just so you could stay on top of everything that was demanding of you in your day today. You finish your workday and now you're at home and you're like, I just need to just unwind and decompress. So, like many people, you grab your phone, you sit on the couch, and you're like, oh, I'm just going to see what updates are on my social feed. So you start scrolling, and it's your typical stuff. You see the funny things, you see the uplifting, inspiring things. You also see the really divisive things. You see the things that create a lot of tension and conflict in our society. You read the comments and you're like, oh, geez, these trolls, where do they even find these trolls? It's your normal mix of things that you experience on social media. You check one platform, check another, maybe check your personal emails too. Guess what? Before you know it, it's been 2 hours and you've just been scrolling this whole time. So, my friends, after sitting with that, my question to you is keeping with your eyes closed or looking outside, how's your body feeling? What sensations do you notice? How do your eyes feel? Your neck? How are your energy levels? Also, what emotions have come up for you? What emotions were present after that really busy workday? What emotions did you feel after that 2 hours of scrolling? Do you feel uplifted? You feel heavy? Maybe you feel neutral. And once you've connected with that, I'm going to get you to write down a few words that are coming up for you after that experience. How are you feeling in your body? How are you feeling emotionally, mentally after that really busy work day and then the evening scrolling on social media? I'll just give you a minute or so. Yeah, and if you want to share in the chat, please go ahead. That's great. Otherwise, you can keep the responses to yourself. Shannon, tension, guilty, disoriented. Christine says numbed, empty. Body, a heavy, thick ball of tightness in my upper chest, emotionally buzzy, anxious, tired, restless, sad, tired, lost time, anxious, annoyed. I definitely feel anxious too. Like I know when I have like a shit ton of emails, I'm falling behind. Or when I start to scroll on social media, anxious is definitely a word for me. Um, Ariana, what about you? What would be a word that would describe that situation for you?
I feel the like guilt and frustration with that because I feel
Mm,
like my personal time is so limited. And then
mm,
to know that I gave away that time to something that isn't actually meaningful or aligned with my values, it really doesn't feel good.
yeah, thanks. And yeah, that ties into someone else who said guilty too. Lost time, anxious, annoyed, indifferent, guilty, trapped, tight, numb, sluggish, tired, sore, sad, defeated, exhausted, angry, out of breath, sad, drained and anxious, a lot of anxiousness, apathetic. Yeah, that's a really interesting word too, disoriented. Okay, so lots of things. All right, folks. Second round of visualization. Again, invite you to close your eyes, just rest, relax your shoulders if they feel tense after that visualization. Relax your jaw if that feels tense. Maybe even look outside a window if that's accessible to you. Now, I'm going to ask you to imagine you have a day off and you have nowhere to be except your favorite place on the land. Maybe that's a forest. Maybe that's by a river. Maybe it's at a park. Maybe you're hiking on your favorite trail. Whatever it is, just visualize yourself on the land, wherever that is. And it's a beautiful sunny day, and you've just spent the last 2 hours walking around, feeling the warmth of the sun on your body. You've enjoyed hearing the sounds of birds, frogs, crickets, squirrels nearby. Maybe you even caught the scent of some pine trees or wildflowers. You've been slowly just walking around, taking it all in, taking deep breaths, feeling that crisp, fresh, clean air circulating through your lungs. Again, you feel enveloped by the warmth of the sun. Maybe you feel the connection to the earth between your toes if you took your shoes off. Maybe you feel grass. Maybe you feel water. Maybe you feel stones, rocks, whatever it is. Just take a moment being in this favorite place on the land, taking in the sights, the sounds, the smells. And after spending some time here, I'm going to ask you, how is this feeling in your body? What sensations do you notice? How are your eyes, your neck? How's your energy levels? And I also want to ask, what emotions have come up for you? Do you feel uplifted? Do you feel heavy? Do you feel neutral? And with that, thinking about that, you're going to just invite you to write down a few words that describe how you're feeling, your state. You can either write it down, keep it to yourself, or use the chat. Rejuvenated, grounded, connected to my ancestors, feeling like me, light, empowered. Yeah, calm, relaxed, at peace, happy. The sun is shining through my office window and feels wonderful and warm on my face. It helped with the reflection for sure. Uplifted and looking forward to spring and paddleboard to break from work soon. Beautiful. I love that. At one, peaceful, renewed, spirit full, soul stirred and inspired. Someone else says blessed and capable, zen, thankful, energized and positive, light, refreshed body, lightness in my whole chest. Feel amazing. Peace, joy, smile. All right. Quite a difference so far, right? Between the first visualization and this one, I would say almost like a quite polar opposite. All right, friends, third and final round. This time, I'm going to get you to imagine that you're with one of your favorite humans. Maybe it's a relative, someone in your family, maybe it's a close friend, maybe it's a colleague that you really enjoy spending time with, or maybe it's a romantic partner. You've decided to have a nice dinner together, just the two of you. And before you realize it, 2 hours have passed by in this evening. Both of you have spent time talking. You're hearing from the other person what's new with them. You've shared with them what's new with you. You've had some really good laughs too, a lot of good laughter medicine. And sometimes you've just sat in silence, contently together. During this time, you're able to share what's going on with you in your personal life, your professional life, and to have a chance to really open up and be vulnerable with one another. And it felt good to connect with this person because it's been a while since you've been able to be so open and genuine and authentic with someone else. All right, friends, you know what's going to happen next. Staying with your eyes closed, looking out your window. I'm going to ask, how is your body feeling now? What sensations do you notice or feel? How are your eyes, your neck, your back? How's your energy levels? What emotions have come up for you in the past 2 hours with your favorite human? Do you feel uplifted? Do you feel heavy? Do you feel neutral? So go ahead and write down your responses in the chat. Joyful and flow, strong, blessed, relaxed, and calm. I love that my partner and I can be in silence together without expectations. He feels like home. Beautiful. Light, joyful, creative, smiles, warmth, connected, fuzzy, heartful, happy, grateful, energized and loved, body sensations, gentle buzz, my limbs, emotions, peaceful, happy, content, happy from having fun. My cheeks would be so sore from smiling so much. I love that. Safe, heard, relaxed, fresh air, salt water, smell and breeze, sunshine, happy and calm, connected, fulfilled, life is worth living. Beautiful. Oh, and I see there are more coming. Thank you. Keep bringing them in the chat. So thank you everyone for doing this visualization and wanted to do this just to, again, cultivate that awareness of when we're hyper connected to our devices and technology, how that makes us feel. Because often it's because it's such a normal part in our lives. Like our phones are usually just glued to our hands. We often don't take a step back and ask ourselves, how does this make me feel in my body, in my emotions, in my spirit? And when we're aware of that, how what makes us feel holistically, mind, body, emotion, spirits, again, we can be better informed to ask, is this making me feel good? This is making me feel neutral, or is it actually really dragging me down? And when we have that awareness, then we're better informed to make better decisions for ourselves. And again, this isn't about guilting or shaming anyone. It's about bringing that self-awareness so we can make the best decisions for ourselves and our well-being. And with that said, I am going to pass it over to Ariana to continue talking about our well-being or the impacts of tech on our well-being.
Hmm. Yeah, thanks for leading us through that exercise, Vanessa. Um, it almost feels funny now to go into a conversation about tech's impact on our well-being because I feel like we've just had that felt experience of it. Um, but I did want to share a few things, and we've cultivated some good feelings from thinking about being on the land, being with a person or an animal that we love. So, as I'm sharing through some of these things, if it starts to feel a little bit activating, maybe bring yourself back to that experience of being out on the land or spending time having dinner with somebody that you love. But some things that we probably know about tech. Um, First and foremost, it can trigger dopamine addiction. Um, every time we log on to social media or we check the news, our brains, dopamine is like, it's often spoken as like the reward chemical, but it's really about like the seeking and receiving of the reward. So my like dopamine seeking behavior comes up when I'm like, ooh, what's on here? What can I go and find? And then I'm rewarded by a funny meme, or I'm rewarded by a notification. And what I've noticed since spending more time on LinkedIn is that I always have notifications, and they are almost never about people commenting on my stuff. It's like someone reposted this or someone commented on a thing. Like, this is very intentional for there to be notifications for everything from like liking a comment. And if I didn't acknowledge the comment, that liked comment pops up again. And it starts to trigger those parts of our brains that are seeking new and novel things. And the difficult part about this is that in the offline world, we don't always experience new and novel things. In fact, a lot of it can almost be a little bit mundane. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but if I'm at home and I'm playing with my daughter and it's a little bit boring, if my brain is like wired to be looking for the new and novel, it can lead to a lot of frustration and boredom and difficulty in being present in something that is just stable and familiar. Of course, there is the challenge of information overload. We are not, I believe, meant to have access to all of the information that we have, where at the palm of our hands or on our laptops, we can have access to pretty much everything and anything. There's the constant barrage of news. There is the ability to just Google something if you've got a question about it. So, all of this, our brains are not designed to take in that much information and process all of it. And what this can do is it can be very overwhelming and overstimulating for our brains. It can lead to mental exhaustion, mental fatigue. And especially if you are someone who tends to multitask, like I really have to be intentional to not do this because it happens very naturally for me. When we're continually switching between, say, I'm working on something, oh, I'm just going to go check my email and then come back. And I'm working, oh, my phone dings. Okay, I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to come back. It's almost like an energy tax that we pay in our brains every time we switch focus and comes back. It takes time for our brains to kind of get back into that flow state that we might have been in before. It can drain our creativity. Again, our brains need time to take in information, whether it's information we've read or information from the outside world. And it takes time for that information to process and for new ideas to generate. And if we're just constantly flooded with new information, we don't really have that spaciousness of thought to form new ideas. It can lead to decreased connection in relationships. So, I'll say for sure, my partner and I have been guilty of this before when we're just unwinding at home and we're both scrolling on our devices. We try to be intentional about it when we're out and about, but it's becoming increasingly common to see people at a dinner table and everyone's on their phones. And it can also cause a decline in mental health. And we can see this through whether it's, again, just being constantly bombarded with all of the atrocities that are happening in the world. We can see it how we might compare our lived experience to the highlight reel that we witness in others on social media. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a study that shows the positive impacts of social media on people's mental health, but it's pretty easy to find studies that show the negative impacts on our mental health. Then if we kind of zoom out a bit and we look at this on more of an interpersonal and a collective level, when we are constantly engaging in, I don't even know if I would call them conversations online, like when Vanessa was referring to like reading the comments and people are like fighting with each other and like the trolls and everything, when we're just constantly exposed to more of a harsh tone through social media, it can actually, like studies have shown that it can start to shift the texture of your own internal narrative. And it can start to shift us to have an internal dialogue that is less open, less empathetic, both towards ourselves and others, and is less able to see nuance. It becomes easier to fall into that rigid binary, this or that thinking. Something that I also witness a lot is that it makes it challenging for us to focus on a specific area of activism. So, for those of us who might use social media as a way to stay informed about what's happening in the world, it becomes clear that there's a lot happening in the world. And I think that this obviously comes from good intentions, but we see that, oh, there's something happening here. I need to dedicate resources. I need to reshare information. I need to learn about this thing. And oh, now I've learned about this. And oh my gosh, that's awful. So now I need to start learning about that. And oh my gosh, this thing. And we just kind of start to like jump from thing to thing to thing, because it activates something very natural within our nervous systems that compels us to want to do more and learn more and be a force for good. But it's hard to be a force for good when we're trying to spread ourselves so thin and be an activist in every single lane. And last but not least, it can lead to a collective environment that is easier to manipulate. And there's a book that a lot of this material that I've pulled from and that we share in here has come from a book that I absolutely loved called Stolen Focus by Johann Hari. And I can pop that into the chat after. But essentially, it's a deep dive into how technology, but also just different elements of our quote unquote modern world have really impacted our attention. And he does a deep dive into the rise of fascism and like the far right in Brazil and the rise of Bolsonaro. Johann Hari is the author. And we can see this happening now with these insidious I don't even know, belief systems of oppression, and how they are very strategically positioned through media. And when we are distracted by social media, when we are distracted by all of the different things that are going on, it becomes easier for our brains to start to buy into what we're being fed. So there's how do I want to say this? There, I believe, is intentionality in the ways that we're fed information and the ways that all of these apps are designed to keep us distracted, to keep us intentionally addicted to them. In the book, he interviews people who used to work for Google, who used to work for Instagram and all of these things, and they are horrified at what they have created and what they had a hand in. And it's quite insidious. So it's not just it makes me feel like crap when I've scrolled for a couple hours. Like, there are widespread collective implications with this, and it's not something to be downplayed.
To add to that, Ariana, what was interesting is Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, he actually refused to give his children an iPad because the tech executives know exactly what they're doing. They know the impacts and the ramifications of it. So, yeah, I thought I would share that because, yeah, super, super interesting. All right. Thank you for sharing all that. And yeah, I haven't read the Stolen Focus book, but it sounds so good. I'm really interested to look at that. So knowing the reality that I'm sure a lot of this is just like you folks know just from lived experience of all of this, and tying this back to living in our colonial capitalist system, I know for myself, when I worked in a large corporate environment for 12 years, after leaving, I would feel guilty if, like being self-employed, I would condition myself, say I have to work minimum 8 hours a day. I have to, or at least fill that time. That's work time. And I was so um conditioned to that that if I worked less than that, I felt guilty. I felt I wasn't productive. I felt like I wasn't doing anything of value or worth. It's wild how our society and our colonial capitalist system ties being busy or productivity with value to who we are. So I would love to hear, just using the chat, is busy part of your identity? You can just put yes or no in the chat. Ditto from someone. Yeah. Um, some yeses, nos, yes, no, yes, no, 1,000,000%. Um, I'm glad to see the no's. So some folks are saying not anymore, and that's powerful. So if you're still living in the realm of, yes, busy is a part of my identity, which very much was part of mine, we can unlearn that behavior, right? We can learn that who we are in of ourselves is sufficient. We know that the work we put in is sufficient, and we don't have to work all hours. We don't have to sacrifice our weekends or vacation, nor should we, right? We are human beings, not human doings for a reason. And so if that is part of your mentality or part of your identity, my invitation to you, and this is something I'm still working on, when people are like, hey, like Ariana, or if Ariana asks me, hey, Vanessa, like, how you doing? Often I want to say, oh, I've been really busy. That's like often my go-to response. So now I'm trying to really train myself to not say that, because I don't want to wear busyness as a badge of honor. And so if that resonates with folks, I'll invite you to be mindful too of responding. Do you want to be tied your identity to being busy, or is there something else that you want to talk about and highlight and amplify in your life that has more meaning, significance to who you are? With that said, I know, Ariana, you had a bit of a story too about busyness.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in the early stages of starting my business, this September will actually be 10 years that I've been working for myself full time, but I started my business in 2013. And at the time, I was working a full-time job and starting my business. And I gradually reduced my hours at my job to be about 24 hours a week. And then I had my business. And so for about a year and a half, I was working about 60 hours a week, if not more. And when it was time for me to finally let go of my jobby job, I was so excited because I thought, wow, I'm going to have 24 extra hours in my week. And what ended up happening was that I continued to work 60 hours a week. I continued to create more work for myself. I was so exhausted and so burned out by that point anyway that things were just taking me longer. It was hard for me to focus. I was distracted. It was just like I just kind of expanded what I was already doing to make it fill up that time because I was so primed to work at that level. And it took me experiencing like full burnout. Like for those of you who may have joined us in November for our burnout session, I shared a little bit about what that experience was like for me. And it really forced me to find a new way to operate. I was like, this work that I'm doing is important to me. And I need to find a way to make it sustainable because I want to do this for the long term. I want this to be my life's work. So I have since cultivated very strict boundaries around work. I really make a point of like having my life be my priority because my work is my priority. And I know that in order for me to show up for my work, I also need to do the things that are important to me and things that I love to do in my life as well. And it took time. So I'm just, I see those of you who said that, like, yes, you still have busyness as a part of your identity. Just holding a lot of space for that, and also acknowledging those of you who said that that was a part, but no longer is anymore.
And so for those who are like, yeah, that is still part of my identity, just know it takes time to divest from that, but it's possible. So just want to you to know it's so relatable, and it's by design that we feel this way. But we can also start to create that awareness, right? So again, that's why we have the circle, just so at least we can start to be aware. And when we have that awareness, we can start to choose differently for ourselves. That's rooted in our holistic well-being. Okay, I'm going to fly through the next few slides just to be mindful of time. But as the slide here says, capitalism isn't just an economic system. It influences how we view ourselves and those around us. So remember, capitalism, colonialism, tech, they're all tightly interconnected, right? And no surprise that it creates these conditions here. It creates consumerism to the point where it impacts our financial well-being because we live outside of our means. It also creates a ton of waste. And one of the circles that we do on burnout, is it the burnout circle? No, I don't think so. It's another one. But the website Sheen, they add 10,000 new items to their website a day. That's wild. And it's to promote that consumerism. So we continually buy, and then whatever we buy or don't buy gets discarded. Or when we buy things we don't need, it gets discarded, creating so much waste, right? So it creates this culture of consumerism, of extraction from ourselves as people, as workers, because employers want to get the most out of us, especially like large corporate environments. So it's about extraction of people and extraction from the land. It's creating an unhealthy competition about being more, keeping up with the Joneses, as they say, winning at all costs. So there's a healthy form of competition, but it also breeds a really unhealthy form of competition. Capitalism is based on oppression of people, and extraction of people. It creates a hyper individualistic system, right? Especially when we're all on our devices. If you're ever on a bus or a SkyTrain or anything, just notice how many people are just on their devices, right? No one's interacting, no one's making eye contact. We're just all hyper connected to our devices, and not with one another. It produces materialism, scarcity mindsets, and a need to always feel productive, to feel like I'm doing something of value or worth with my time. So these are all really bred in a colonial environment. And so when we start to decolonize, the opposite of all of this becomes true. So this is an invitation to start to really decolonize our mindsets and decolonize our relationship with tech, so we can start to foster that healthy and genuine connection to self, others, and the land. So what happens when we work less? For folks here, maybe there's business owners here or managers are like, oh no, they're trying to get the people to stop working. That's actually not the case. What's actually might be counterintuitive for some folks is we actually get more done when we aren't expected to put in so many hours. Any guesses using chat let's say people on average work an 8-hour workday. Of that time, how many hours do you think people are actually productive at work in an average 8-hour day? Let's say you have a 9 to 5 job. Of that time, how many hours do you think folks are actually productive? 4 to 5, 3, 5, 4, 5, 2, definitely not 8. Ding, 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 definitely not 8. The first half of the day, yeah, totally. The answer that's been studied is actually between 3 to 6 hours a day. That's how often folks are productive. And guess what? We're not all like machines, and we have different peaks and valleys. So some of us are actually more productive in the evening, or could be more productive in the evening, or we're productive at different pockets of time. So to put everyone in the same box of the same work schedule is so actually counterproductive and counterintuitive to actually getting good work done. So this myth of working a 40-hour work week, 5 days a week, it's actually not in service to employers to have employees give so much of their day at work. Because guess what? Of that, half that time, we're not even getting stuff done anyways. And this is actually shown. There was a study done in Australia too. They wanted to look at doing a 4-day work week instead of a 5-day work week. Here are the results. This might not surprise anyone. Social media usage at work. When you don't want to do stuff at work or you're procrastinating, you'll just go on your phone and start scrolling on social media. During a 4-day work week, that personal social media use fell by 35%. So 1/3 usage fell because people are like, oh, well, I have 4 days. I'm going to be more productive. I'm going to be more focused. Team engagement went up. It increased by 30%. Folks were more connected to their work and with one another on their teams. Stimulation at work was increased by 40%, and stress levels went down by 15%. So it's actually good for ourselves. It's actually good for our productivity. And we need to dispel the myth that we need to be productive during this workday, this 8-hour workday. Fact of the matter is we aren't. So we also need to give ourselves a break and show ourselves compassion and know it's not realistic to be productive for 8 hours. 3 to 6 hours is the norm for most people. And it's not always in the same window of time. For some folks, it'll be in the evening. A lot of Europe has 4-day work weeks. And so it's my hope that we start to shift towards that too. All right, moving along. So all of this to say, rest is resistance. I know there's a book. Who's the author of that book, Ariana? Rest is Resistance?
Trisha, I don't know if it's pronounced Hersey, but it's a great book. And she also has a new book out as well. I can't remember the title of it, but it's relatively new, but really,
and
really good medicine.
And I see someone else just dropped the name in the chat too. Thank you. So Trisha Hersey, rest is resistance. What is meant by that is when we rest, we're resisting colonialism, we're resisting capitalism, we're reclaiming our time, reclaiming that we are human beings, not human doings. So take your breaks, don't skip your breaks, take your lunch, take your vacation, and know that when we rest, we're reclaiming our time and giving ourselves space to reinvest our time in things that matter to us, to our holistic well-being, to our families, to our communities, to attending ceremony, to doing cultural events. These things are so important. And this is how we can also start to subtly resist colonialism and capitalism by taking that time, taking breaks, taking vacation, and know that we don't have to be productive, be available 24/7 because it's not sustainable and it's not realistic. So again, rest is resistance, my friends. For folks who feel guilty about that, acknowledge that, and start to shift, to give yourself permission to take breaks.
Yeah, take that nap. Feels so
take
good.
That nap. We're going to fight the power by taking naps. And I just wanted to show this really high level timeline, not to get like historical, but like the reality is tech is so new to our human species. We don't have a roadmap for this because this is literally nothing our ancestors were exposed to. And so just to show like how so new this is to us as a human species, humans, like anatomically modern humans, have been around for 300,000 years. Okay, so very old versions of ourselves, but our current modern human has been around 300,000 years. And if we use the human era timeline, which my partner's all about, also known as the Holocene calendar, it's a decolonized form of looking at time and years and the calendar, because our current calendar is very Christian based. So this really actually just reclaims who we are as a human species, religion aside. So again, the human era calendar, although humans have been around for 300,000 years, our modern era is about 12,000 years old. And they use that, the first marker, as the first like major building that was created by humans. So that's year zero. So that was 12,000 years ago. So the first major building, or it was a temple, it was constructed in Turkey. So that's the marker of our modern human era. Then you see this timeline, we skip by 1,000 years, 1,000 years, 3,000 years, 2,000 years. Major things happen. First major city was developed on Earth, and that was in Jericho. Humans we start to use trade and trading in long distances, not just like within our villages, not just within our tribes, but like far distances. We start to trade goods and services with one another. That's when we start to domesticate plants and animals. It was in year 5,000, the Bronze Era, the creation of the wheel. Year 7,000, major civilizations such as ancient Egypt, China, is when the pyramids were erected, the Great Wall of China. Fast forward another 1,000 years, many more cultures start to emerge and starting to write down their legends in whatever form that looked like for them. It was the year 9,500, what is known as Western culture begins. So all these major things in our huge timeline of human existence. And it was in year 11,750, otherwise known as the 1700s, when the Industrial Revolution starts. It was in the 1930s, or year 11,930. So the 1930s, radio transmission becomes mainstream. It wasn't until the 1950s, or year 11,900, TV goes mainstream. And then boom, all this stuff happens rapidly in short windows of time. After TV goes mainstream, the internet becomes publicly available, year 11,999, or as we refer to it as 1990. That's only 35 years ago, folks. Again, this is so new to our human species. Literally, our ancestors didn't have any exposure to this. Then Google was founded 8 years later. Then in 2000, only 50% of Canadian households reported having at least one internet user. Like, how cute is that? Fast forward, Facebook is founded. Then the iPhone is released 3 years later. Then 5 years later, in 2022, 84% of Canadians own a smartphone. Like, look how fast that developed. This is so new to us. And as a human species, we're figuring out how to use this because this is so foreign. And so when we did that visualization earlier, it's no wonder we felt better when we're connected to the land and connected to our loved ones, because that's how we've lived and thrived for tens of thousands of years. This technology is so new and it's so foreign. This isn't how we've been living. And so again, we bring this forward just to be really mindful that this is new. And so we have to treat this technology with a lot of caution, a lot of mindfulness, because we really don't know the whole impact and ramifications of it on our holistic well-being.
Yeah, I think, when I was looking this up, just the speed at which things have increased in the last 35 years. And our nervous systems and our brains, we don't evolve that quickly, right? Like it takes time. So we're still very much primed for that human to human connection, human to plant relative, human to animal relative connection. And who knows what will happen in 10,000 years, if maybe we'll have nervous systems that are more wired to be actually like digitally wired. I don't know. But right now, our bodies and our minds have not quite caught up yet. So with all of this said, we want to turn it over to you. And we'd love for you to share in the chat some of the things that you might do either personally or professionally to help you be mindful of limiting screen time. So what are some things that you do? And maybe while folks are popping things into the chat, Vanessa, is there anything in particular that you do?
So what I've done, because I was mindful of just being on social media a lot, and so this year I removed apps off my phone. So I still have my accounts, but it forces me if I want to go on social media, I'll go to my laptop. And guess what? I find I don't actually want to go on social media, but I
Mm.
do when it's on my phone, which is really interesting. I kept LinkedIn on my phone, which is it's interesting because it's really ramped up how much I'm on LinkedIn. But so that's one thing I've done, and I think eventually I want to get to the point where I don't have a smartphone anymore. I just have an old school flip phone. So I'm working towards that.
Love that for you.
What about you?
Um, Yeah, if I'm like out and doing things, I try to leave my phone in a place where it's not accessible. If I'm at home, I'll like put it in another room so I can't easily grab it. I will often delete social media apps off my phone on the weekends and also just trying to do things that really engage me in life. So when I'm in the garden or if I'm like down by the water, if I'm out with friends, I find I'm much less inclined to want to reach for it. So I'll just read some of the things here, folks. I encourage you to read in the chat because there's lots of really good stuff coming up. So things I'm seeing, leaving phone in my vehicle, deleting socials a few years ago, and zero regrets. I'm seeing a few that have enforced that or reinforced that. Oh, turn my phone to grayscale. That's an interesting one. Giving a timeline. I want to remove phones and tablets from the meal table. Um, my work title includes the word outreach. One thing I make a point of doing is making initial and follow up connections with new people in person. I love that rather than reaching out via email. Um, App limiting my time on certain apps. So yeah, there's different things on our phones where we can set remind or set limits. So our phones will be like, hey, you're at the limit. Do you want to keep doing this? Dedicated screen free time and have taken up doing puzzles. I love that. Keeping the phone on silent, notifications off. I could start meditating. Yes. Oh my gosh, there's so many good things. And I'm very intrigued by this grayscale. I'm going to have to look into that. And started growing seeds indoors. Yes, I'm sorry, I get very excited about gardening and plants and all of the things. So feel free to share with me after what you're growing. Um, and I'm noticing in the Q&A as well that somebody has brought up a device called Brick, which I have seen this and I've considered getting this. So it's interesting to see this brought up. And it makes your smartphone a dumb phone by blocking access to the fun apps. And you have to physically unbrick it. So yeah, there's a lot of different things. And on the next couple slides, I think a lot of these we've kind of mentioned already. Um, I'll maybe just bring in different ones that I haven't seen, and apologies if somebody did share this, but something that I think is really helpful, especially if you work from home, is to have like a ritual around closing out the workday because the boundaries are blurred, right? Like if you're in the office, there is at least that physical act of leaving the office to go home. Whereas if you're working from home and your workspace is in your living space, it can be really easy to blur those lines. So maybe there's a ritual of like cleaning up dishes and mugs. Maybe there's a certain type of tea that you'll drink in one specific mug at the end of your workday. What will signify to your brain and your body that work is done and now I'm moving into my quote unquote home time, even though I've been in the same space. And something that I really love is the Pomodoro technique to help with focus. So I think traditionally it's done where you would work for 25 minutes and then take a 5-minute break. I find the 25 minutes kind of interrupts my flow. So I like to set a timer for 50 minutes. And unless I have to go to the bathroom or drink some water, I don't let myself do anything in those 50 minutes besides that task that I've identified. And then I give myself 10 minutes to like mess around, get a snack, check my socials, and then it's back to like 50 minutes of focused work. So that's on a professional front. And then on a personal front, one of the things that I really want to draw attention to is the first is around identifying tools, practices, relationships, and hobbies that excite and inspire you. Um, because when we have something that we have what may be a bit of an addictive relationship with, when there's something that has a big grip on our lives, to simply say, I'm going to just remove that from our life, from my life, can be really challenging. And for somebody who's navigated addiction, I can speak from experience that it's really easy to just like remove one addiction and replace it with another. And so this is where it becomes really helpful to start doing things like puzzles, or to do the gardening, or to make a point of maybe having a weekly walk with a friend. Things to start helping you re-engage with life and to do the things that help you feel good. And then also remembering your why. So what do you gain by disconnecting? And maybe even what do you lose by staying connected? We're motivated by different things. Some of us are motivated by what we're moving towards, and some are motivated by what we're moving away from. So just know your why and really identify why this is important to you. And so last piece we have to share here, when we're looking at like disconnecting to reconnect, what really came through for Vanessa and I was reconnecting to the land, reconnecting to our non-human relatives, reconnecting to the beings that were here long before we came here and hopefully will be here long after we go away. And so some really simple and accessible ways that we can deepen our connection to the land could be to explore seasonal foods and maybe even grow some. I've seen some folks in here talking about gardening, and especially with spring, it's nettle season, and I had my first cup of fresh nettle tea last week, and it was so delicious. And you don't even need to live in a place where you can harvest nettles. Like you could buy some dried nettle or get some nettle tea from even from a grocery store. So seeing what herbs and foods are in season in your area and starting to nourish your body with those. If you have a tree that you walk by on your way to and from the bus or work each day, or if there's a tree outside your window, maybe noticing the changes on that tree. So it's been beautiful to see the trees outside my windows, and as they go through their seasons of changing colors of leaves, shedding leaves, and now the buds are coming out, and even some of the plum trees, they do have flowers on them. Noticing moon cycles and how you feel with the moons. I think we can all probably speak to having experiences where we've been like, wow, that full moon was really big. And so just starting to tune into those maybe more subtle shifts as well throughout the lunar cycle. Putting out bird feeders and seeing who comes to visit. And spending time with water, whether that's out on the land or in the shower. Water is so cleansing for us. Our bodies are made primarily of water, and to sit by the water, to spend time with the water can be really calming and grounding for the nervous system. And last but not least, learning the traditional names of the places that you visit and the meanings and the stories that are behind those names. Our indigenous languages, you can learn so much about the cultural beliefs and worldviews through learning about the language and understanding kind of how the words come together. And so this is a really, really beautiful way to deepen your connection to the places that you live or the places that you visit. And I'm seeing lots of good things being added in the chat here as well. So I'll pass it back to you here, Vanessa, to start to close us out.
Yeah, and I saw a few good questions come in the Q&A, so we'll hopefully get to address at least a couple of them, but we would love to hear from you, after everything we shared and talked about, and what other folks have shared in the chat. Really great ideas, insightful things have been shared in the chat. We want to ask, what's one thing you'll pick up after today's session? Considering today's spring, And if we go far back enough in our ancestry, we'll know that spring is actually the time of the new year, right? It's just logical. This is the start of new beginnings, new growth. So this is actually the new year. So for folks who are all about New Year's resolutions, well, here's a time to actually set new intentions for the year ahead. So curious, what will you pick up after today's session? What will you put down after today's circle? So just go ahead and share in the chat what stood out for you, what will you pick up, and then what will you put down, metaphorically, symbolically, or maybe literally too. Group chat notifications were turned off during the session. Love that. Notice changes in the land with spring. Beautiful. Reconnecting back to the land and slowing down. I later found out that mountain is memorialized in Indigenous story as the resting place of the first man's best friend. I literally wept when I learned that because it felt so real and true in my core. Beautiful. Oh, it's New Year today too. Is that Persian New Year? New Ruse, Peruse, yeah. Cool. Happy New Year. Getting outside more. Um, more time, personal life versus reconnecting with nature. Love that. I need to reconnect with nature to decompress. Walking in the forest, growing plants gardening. Um, Set up a time frame for social media use. Possibly delete an app or two. I deleted all my apps yesterday, and I'm going to keep them off my phone. I'm going to walk midday to ground myself. Beautiful. Reduce politic news scrolling. Yeah. I just deleted Facebook and X on my phone. Wow. Okay. People are taking action now, real time. Um, Beautiful. Thank you for sharing all these things. There's so many good ones coming up. I wish we had more time to get to them. Um, but I do know there's one question I saw in the Q&A that I wanted to answer to get to, and someone asked something about um, this is the one I want to address. And it says, in conversation with a person from Florida, she had the argument that capitalism stimulates the highest creativity. I'm wondering what Ariana and Vanessa think about this statement. When I consider it, I see so much creativity in Indigenous cultures, medicine, song, dance, ceremony, prayer, arts. 100%. And what I would say is, the pure form of capitalism is free markets, which just essentially means being able to start a business, which is amazing. Nothing's wrong with that. The problem with what we saw with capitalism on Turtle Island and now, abroad, is that when capitalism started, which was founded on colonialism, so there would have been no capitalism without the theft of bodies and land, that wealth started to be concentrated by an elite few. And this is where and how we have wealth disparity. So there's nothing wrong with having a business, being in business, earning money and profits, nothing wrong with that. And when I work with Indigenous youth and creating pop-up businesses, I say there's nothing wrong with making money. Money is now just our new form of trade, but it's what we do with that money and who's hoarding the wealth, because a lot of wealth is concentrated in a few. So that's the issue with capitalism and how it's manifested. It's been based on exploitation and it's based on hoarding. And so a few have the majority of the wealth and the rest of us don't have as much. So I would just offer that as an answer. And I know we're at time. I think I could keep talking forever on this.
Thank you,
But there's
Vanessa.
thank you, Serene.
Yeah, you did amazing. Just in perspective of everyone's time, I think we'll just answer one more question and then hear your guys' closing remarks. Majority of them you answered quite a bit, so I think this one just kind of stood out for the ones that I noticed is do you have any ideas to share around how we can engage in dialogue about how we can disconnect to reconnect with family, friends, and colleagues? So, you know how you were mentioning that you notice it on the SkyTrain or public transit, or even just walking from places to places, like people are always looking and not really even being present within their own atmosphere. Like what sort of recommendations do you have for that?
Yeah, it's a great question. There was, and I don't know if it's still a trend, but there was a trend going around on TikTok before about loud budgeting and like just letting people know that like you're budgeting and you're not spending money on different things. And I think that we can do the same with our tech too. And it doesn't have to necessarily be from like a high and mighty place. Like, look at me, I've deleted Facebook. But to just like be honest and say, hey, I might not be getting back to you as quick anymore because of XYZ. Or if there's something that you learned from today or something in your own explorations outside of this that you find really insightful, I always find that like asking folks, like being like, hey, I learned this really interesting thing and I'm curious if you'd be open to hearing about it. It's invitational, so we're not kind of forcing it on folks. But then it can start to create some conversation and dialogue. And I think that's the big part. Just as we've seen here, having these discussions, planting these seeds of awareness that I think has been a big theme today is a really great way to approach it. Anything you want to add, Vanessa?
Um, Quickly, something my partner and I did. I've been living in my current building for like several years. There's only 40 units, so it's not a huge building. And I realized I only know a handful of people. Like, this is wild. And so my partner and I were intentional about creating flyers and just asking folks, hey, like we want to just create a greater sense of community here. And so we created QR codes. Folks could sign up if they're interested. And we had like 11 different units say yeah. And so now we have a group chat, ironically using tech to keep us connected. But we've actually organized like social events. People have said, hey, I don't have laundry soap. Does anyone have laundry soap? We're like, yeah, no problem. Like it's just beautiful, but we just need to be intentional. And so again, tech can be used in good ways, but we actually have to be really intentional about forging those connections and relations with one another.
I love that.
Me too. I love that you guys are just modeling what you're talking about and also just like taking the risk with certain things and also just like willing to try new things because sometimes some things don't work. And from what I was hearing from Ariana, like it almost seems like if you had like little prompts or like how Facebook has statuses, I don't see people use them as much other than resharing, but maybe just having a pinned status saying like I won't be using this as actively as possible and also maybe in your bio on Instagram or TikTok and just so if people are messaging you, they can like if they go to your profile or anything, they can see like, oh, okay, they're not on social media as much as they used to be. So I like that.
Yeah, I love a good slow inbox autoresponder. I used to have that a lot, is like to just let folks know that I'm not going to respond right away because I'm not here all the time. So
Hmm.
that might be something.
And like what Vanessa was saying about being more intentional about it. I think when we have social media at our hands, sometimes it's just we don't even know what we're saying half the time. But like if you're a bit more intentional with it, you're more willing to have a better connection with the people you're communicating with. So yeah. Do you guys want to share any closing remarks before we end the webinar?
I think I'll just express my gratitude. The irony is not lost on me that we had your attention here on technology for the last 90 minutes. So just offering a lot of gratitude to all of you who shared your time and energy and your own wisdom and insights in the chat. I really appreciated hearing from you as well. And I hope that today's session planted some new seeds for you and also just gave you a little bit of a break to nourish yourself in what might be the midst of a busy day for you. So, Chimigwach.
And I just want to wish everyone happy spring. Thank you for sitting in virtual circle with all of us. And yeah, we hope that this gives you permission to be more intentional about how you show up for yourself and your well-being.
Cool.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all our guests that joined us today. And thank you so much, Ariana and Vanessa, for just sharing your wise words about how to disconnect and reconnect and create community. I think like a lot of us who were tuning in today in the webinar got a great amount of information on how to connect with our greater community, whether that be friends, family, or people who are around your area. And just knowing that the history with everything, I ended up looking up on my end, the 8-hour workday came from this guy named Robert Owen. And his idea was 8 hours of work, 8 hours of rest, 8 hours of like playtime. So I know it doesn't work like that. Ariana kept mentioning the moon time, sickness. Like it's not always going to be like we're not robots. We don't do an 888 day all the time. So thank you so much on that. And just before we end the webinar, we'd love to bring your attention to our upcoming webinars in the season. We have Indigenous Patient Experience on April 17th. That is measuring cultural safety in healthcare with Dr. Jenny Morgan and Allison Hill. And then we also have on April 22nd, we have Daylighting Seven Colonial Knots in COVID-19 Pandemic Response, doing our homework with the BC Office of Provincial Health Officer. And all our webinars are free to sign up for on our website at www.learningcircle.ubc.ca. And yeah, you can check out our newsletter if you also want to stay in touch. And we will send those out, as you know, like fairly often. But thank you everyone for joining us. We look forward to seeing everyone at our next Learning Circle. Lam Lam, thank you.